Welcome to the Encinitas Chamber Chat Live podcast. I'm Carol Knight with the Encinitas Chamber of Commerce. With the help from my talented friends at Max Deluxe, we will showcase the many aspects and unique qualities of the Encinitas community. Whether it be focusing on local business owners, advice from experts, or highlighting some of the local gems Encinitas has to offer, we hope you'll find this podcast informational and entertaining. As the baby boomer generation ages, San Diego's older adult population is one of the most rapidly growing demographics in the region. The San Diego Association of Governments projects the population of people aged 60 and older will grow from 627,000 in 2020 to nearly 1 million by 2035. Along with an increasing number of people living with chronic health conditions such as Alzheimer's disease, the region is also an expensive one, especially for seniors who may have limited income or depend solely on Social Security. To discuss these challenges and present options for seniors in the area, we are thrilled to have with us two experts today. David DaCosta, author of Downsizing with Distinction, founder of DaCosta Properties, and current chairman of the board of the Encinitas Chamber of Commerce. And Therese Farley in Community Relations at Belmont Village Senior Living in Encinitas. Thanks for being here today. So tell me, where does one even begin to consider leaving a house that you've called a home for so many decades?
Well, I'll take that with your permission, Therese.
You bet.
So I call it, you got to start with having the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And simply put, it's a meeting of the minds. If you have a spouse, got to meet with her, significant other, whatever the case might be, but you got to have the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
In my case, I discussed this with my wife, and she discussed it with me about 6 years ago, had a little conversation. And after that conversation, 8 weeks afterwards, we were out of our house and in our new place. That was a little extreme for some, but true story.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the impetus, if you will, to prompt me to write the book.
Interesting. So were you guys on the same page to begin with?
Not really. I didn't really want to go. And the surprising thing was, my wife's home was her castle. I thought she'd never leave. And I popped the question and she says, yeah, honey, I'm ready.
Mm-hmm.
So that was an opening of the mind. And that's why I said, you got to start with a conversation, get everybody on the same page.
Right. So now you guys are both healthy and able.
Yes, she had some surgeries. So one of the things was a 2-story and a 1-story would have been more comfortable. So in our downsizing home, obviously it had to be 1-story. Single level.
So you're talking about obviously downsizing from a large home to a smaller home. What are some of the other options to consider when you're thinking about downsizing, or what should those factors be?
Sure. So from my perspective, I totally can piggyback on you saying it's a process, because in senior living, it is completely a conversation that goes on for a long time. And oftentimes we find that the family members are the catalysts for trying to get mom or dad out of their home and into a safer environment. So senior living would be a more supportive environment for them in the aging process. So it's downsizing for sure, like you did, but it's into a senior living environment where your meals and different things are going to be provided for you.
Right, and I know emotionally I'm very attached to a lot of things in my house, probably much to the chagrin of my husband, because I always think, the grandchildren are going to come and we want a big spot for them to sit and play, and I have toys from my previous career that I still have in the garage waiting for that moment to happen. So I don't even know how you even wrestle with that.
Well, we did a little wrestling, and we, again, part of the thought process. But my kids, fortunately, my 2 daughters are nearby and within 15, 20 minutes. And they weren't using our place anymore. They weren't coming over, even though we had the big party place, we had land. So that kind of died down. They had their own friends. So guess what? We started entertaining at their places, which suited me just fine, a lot less headache and bother and everything else. So that worked out in our favor. And I think the thing too, community living, senior community, yes, that's huge. But also, we looked on it as a simplifying of our lifestyle. So there wasn't the upkeep, there wasn't the massive garden, there wasn't all the honeydews that I was supposed to do that I have neglected from time to time. So a simpler lifestyle. I felt lighter. If you wanted to travel, you close one or two doors and you are gone.
Right, right, right. Now, I imagine there's more to it than just putting up a for sale sign in your front lawn.
I will take that question because I'm the realtor. So yes, a lot more to it, and it's all in the preparation and the meeting of the minds to make sure you have those conversations, those meetings, if you will, so that everybody is in sync, and you do outline the process. Everybody's got to be on board. We sign off on it and we implement. There's a decluttering stage. And then there's a home preparation stage and fixing all the honey-do things so that the house is going to show in its best light.
Did you find, David, that your kids don't want your stuff too? Adult children aren't
question.
really.
Oh, yes. Goodwill did very well with us.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
They just didn't want. We had 3 sets of china. We had 2 sets of this. We had, and hand-me-downs from my wife's parents and my parents. And you're absolutely right. What we think are our prized possessions, they're great memories for us, and they're prized possessions for
I
us.
totally
But
agree.
nobody else wants. And said, well, I paid top dollar for this. Why can't I get this in a resale store? Nope, you're going to sell it for pennies on the dollar. That's the reality.
That's a good point. My parents are actually in independent living, but in a progressive community, so they have their own cottage, but they have a full-on basement of things from my childhood, family heirlooms from the 1800s, and my mother is very invested in these, and my sister and brother and I are not so much. So it's trying to figure out, okay, when she dies, what are we going to do with it, and what can we actually keep, and what's really important to us.
Sure. And I think I see that all the time with our seniors that are moving in. They're torn between parting with these things because there are memories attached to them, but their adult children don't want some Waterford china that they got for their wedding. They want their own choice. They've got different styles now. And I find that I have moved more and more boxes of photo albums and different things from house to house to house. They're yearbooks. Why do I have their yearbooks? So at some point you really do have to have that conversation and say, take what you want, what means something to you, because we're going to part with it now so that you can downsize and have that be a seamless process.
And if I might add, I think part of that legacy, if you will, of handing over or moving from that house is I draw on the experience that I had with my in-laws. So they were sitting there waiting for stuff to happen, and they were miserable. And my wife and myself, we had to end up doing a lot of the decluttering and going up into the attic and going through the family heirlooms, videotaping everything. So I have that experience, and it's not fun because it's a lot of work and it's very time consuming. And again, both sides got to be in sync usually. So I didn't want to have my kids go through that same hassle, if you will. So that's kind of part of my legacy to them. I said, guys, you can just sell the house pretty much if myself and my wife aren't here and move on with your life.
Right, I concur on that. So we're having my mother sort of go through this process, and last time I was out, we were having her videotape the corner cabinets and the china and all those stories, so the history is still there, but maybe physically we don't have to take all that stuff and divide it all once they pass.
And that's a good way for her, I think, to process what's happening without just, okay, this is getting donated, this is trash.
Right.
She's able to hold on to the memory.
And we talked a little bit with David about downsizing from a home to a smaller home. So your community is not only going through this with a house, but they're moving into a much different environment than independent living.
Right. There's a whole lot of psychological prep that goes into that. And oftentimes with seniors, they are not, some are on board, some are not on board, and some are emergent, right? So they've had a fall, they're coming from skilled nursing or something like that. So I think for us, the education comes in trying to have them understand what senior living is, because there's such a misconception for seniors of a certain generation that this is clinical, this is sterile, this is kind of something very much that they abhor. They don't want any part of it. And then they come in and they see this is beautiful. This is a privilege. It's not a punishment. And they're really delighted. So most of the time, I would say, David, just like you were saying with your wife, the men are the king of their castles. Women don't want to leave either. But now, post-pandemic, most of them want socialization. So that has been a huge, that's just been a great way for them to walk in and go, well, yeah, I might not have wanted to leave my house, but I'm really only using 2 rooms in the home, and there's nobody there if I need something. Sometimes they're not driving anymore. So there's a lot of reasons for it. It's just a long process to get them there. It's not going to happen overnight.
Right. And I think, excuse me, what you do, Therese, is so much more challenging in my mind because let's face it, when you're talking about a retirement community, the last person that wants to be there is probably the retired person or a couple. Their kids want it, everybody else wants it. It's a good thing. But sometimes it's dragging and screaming to get them there, or just to even discuss the situation.
Just to discuss it. So I'm always saying, just bring them in for lunch.
Right.
Right.
And Belmont is such a
it
beautiful
is. I mean,
setting.
all
Everything there is pretty
the
perfect.
facilities and the resources there, because it really is not my grandmother's or great grandmother's nursing home.
Exactly.
It's just such a misnomer.
It is, and the word nursing home.
Right. So, I mean, can you take us through a little bit about the stages of something like Belmont Village?
So we are independent living, assisted living. We have a mid to moderate program for early stages of dementia that wouldn't require a secured environment. The person isn't wandering, that kind of thing, but maybe they just have cognitive decline that needs to be addressed with programming throughout the day, a routine that really helps them, and engagement with other people. So that's been a huge flagship program for us because so many people are showing signs of cognitive decline after being isolated through the pandemic and just in the aging process in general. And then, of course, we have our secured memory care. So we have those different levels of care. And I love, David, when people will come and say, oh, it's time to downsize. We're moving into senior living. It's less and less. They're staying at home longer. And as a result, they need more care when they come to us. So our care challenges are definitely increasing in the senior population. And I think it's really important to have, tenured staff and different services that can address those needs. But still to have the dignity to age in place and be able to do as much as you can for yourself.
And, aging in place is the classic preferred solution to everything.
Absolutely.
Because, I have experience there where the house needs to be retrofitted with the grab bars and the special walk-in tubs and things like that. So most seniors would prefer to age in place. I've discovered that in my years doing this. But again, it's usually that one thing that triggers the move. And usually, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a fall.
It's a fall. Oh, 9 times out of 10, it's a fall. But it could just be losing your driving privileges. Why would you want to be stuck at home? We have scheduled transportation. Or macular degeneration. You can't read the expiration on your food. You can't open your medications.
Prescriptions.
Yeah, so having that level of support for medication management, having nutritious meals provided, those things in and of themselves can dramatically improve somebody's physical condition and cognitive condition. So that's kind of what I mean by supportive environment. If they're in independent living, they can still have an apartment where they can choose to do as much or as little with the community as they want, but they have those things in place so that the families and they know that they're doing better than they were at home.
And I really think that extends their life. I mean, you're giving them the support, the services, the camaraderie, all those support services. I really think they have a better quality of life and probably a longer life as well.
And I could even go as far as saying, in my experience, I've seen some of my clients actually improve. They have a new friendship circle, their camaraderie. They're playing games that they never thought of, they'd only heard of before. They always wanted to do this. Or, maybe I can golf 7 days a week or do whatever. So,
and losing a spouse, that's a big thing. That's also another reason that a lot
some
of
have found
people,
new loves, right?
Right,
Exactly.
right. But they certainly have found a support group. They've got friends there at the community that have experienced the same thing that they have, and it's just really nice to watch those those things take place, because when you're eating in a dining room, first of all, you eat more than you would eating alone. Seniors are not great about eating. If they just kind of lose interest in food when they're aging at home alone. But they come into that environment and it's more social. So and there's themes, there's parties, there's different things. So that is fun to kind of watch these wilted flowers, if you will, when they come in, after being at home alone, and they get into the community and they just perk right back up. It's like you've watered a plant. It's fun to see.
Wow.
And just to add, and keep the conversation going, after starting that conversation, seniors move into a community, it can be from 65 to 105.
It can.
Right in the area I live in, if I may digress a bit, Lake San Marcos, on my street, 3 doors down, I've got 105 years old, 85 years old, some 40-something, some 50-something, and me, some, I'll stay quiet. No, but it's a silver tsunami, so let the gray hairs speak for themselves.
Right.
But I think the thing is that even though we're a close-knit community, they are in isolation. And it's not uncommon, once a month to just see a fire truck pull up because somebody has fallen.
Yeah.
And the kids might be 20 miles away or 20 hours away by plane or what have you.
Right.
So it's important, again, with a helpful place, community like a Belmont,
Yeah.
to have that go-to scenario where the parents, the rest of the family are at ease.
Absolutely.
Right. And going back to the camaraderie and the social part of it, I think you get such a diverse mix of folk.
You do.
So you're really out of your circle and you're meeting all these people from all walks of life that maybe you hadn't been exposed to or had the opportunity to be
Right.
friends with or experience before.
It's very, very true, Carol, because when I think about the people coming in, many of them, if they needed care, were home with caregivers. And that wasn't optimal because that's not totally reliable. When you're in a community and you have 24-hour care, if somebody calls in sick, there are many others there to pick up the slack. So it's different than being at home, but also a caregiver isn't going to connect with that senior the way our unique peer group connects with us. We have experienced the same period in history together. So there's, even if you have very different backgrounds, you always have something to connect on. And I love that in the conversations I hear in the dining room, or the fact that all of them have such distinguished pasts. They are engineers, doctors, lawyers, a lot of former educators and administrators. So it's really fun to hear them really draw from those rich, diverse experiences and
And
share
they
them.
enjoy sharing those experiences. Yes, I've had fighter pilots and ship commanders, and it's just fascinating. And they get a chance to tell their story. And that's important because they are in a community.
Yeah, I love the stories. That's why I'm there.
Yeah.
They're just, these people are so fascinating. But yeah, I think when I look at Encinitas as a whole, there are a lot of people aging in place and needing community living. I know my mother-in-law's at High Country Villas, so community 55 and
Great
over
area.
nearby. And I love that area. There isn't that next level of support if you need care. So being able to stay at home as long as possible is great, but then all of a sudden you might need to be having your medications, like we said, administered, or maybe you've had a fall and you're terrified of water and you need to have somebody stand by and assist with a shower. Those kinds of things, I think, are just the next level in the aging process.
So does Encinitas offer, the city or the County of San Diego offer any programs to support those folks who may want to age at home a little bit longer?
I don't know if they specifically do in terms of like any volunteer drivers, things like that. But like for my mother-in-law, it's all family. So if your family is not local, you're in trouble because they're the ones taking you to the doctor appointments. They're the ones taking you out to the grocery store, making sure that your food is okay to eat, and all of those things that we find when we go into people's homes as they're aging alone could be
Right.
falling by the wayside.
I do know that St. Paul's Pace,
That's a great program.
which is new-ish to Encinitas, has a lot of programs that they can offer transport and
right.
to doctor's appointments and things like that. So I think they're going to be at the Senior Expo as well. So hopefully they can spread the word on their services.
Yeah, that is
So
a great
maybe this is answering your question a little bit, but the city of Encinitas, I used to volunteer for their senior drive-in program 5-6 years ago.
Did you?
But it was very sporadic because it was dependent on the city staff, and there were a lot of pieces to fit in and volunteers, and it was kind of cumbersome, and it wasn't always pleasurable for the seniors, I don't think, because they still had to rely on a third or a fourth party.
Right. I thought about doing that at one point, just to give back a little, and I thought, if you can't be committed to something, don't do it.
Correct.
And because that's just going to disappoint people. So I worry that maybe it's not as consistent as.
And then
one
with
would like.
COVID, that kind of threw
Right.
everything out the window.
Right.
Like everything.
All right, so I do have to talk about the cost of some of these things. So that probably comes into play.
Yes. Can I ask a question of the interviewer?
Yeah.
So, and I was going to ask Therese, this question is for Therese primarily, I think. Have you seen, the market has been super strong the last 4 or 5 years, nothing like it ever in the history of real estate. Have you seen a greater influx of people coming into your community, maybe wanting to get top dollar for their home and say, well, now's the time, we may as well do it rather than wait for something to happen. Let's be more proactive.
Right. They really are. They're really, because that is your nest egg. That's your retirement, right? That's usually most people's biggest investment. So a lot of them do want to be able to maximize that, or even rent, to be able to get their home prepared to rent it so that can offset costs. Both of those are great alternatives for the cost of senior living, which is not a cheap date.
Which is a good transition.
Yeah, not a cheap date at all.
All right, so tell me a little bit about what that could look like.
Yeah, so if there is no care needed, for example, for us, a one-bedroom apartment might start around $6,000 a month, and that is going to be everything really that you need except your private telephone. So you're spending a lot more up front, but you really don't have as many bills as you used to because your utilities are included, your food is included, your transportation is included. And then we add care plans on so that people don't have to move from one apartment to another as they age in place, except in the event of secured memory care need. But you can add medications onto that. You can add shower assistance onto that. So the whole building is licensed. Therefore, you don't have to go from one building to another when you need assistance, which I love. Right. So it's very blended. We have independent living and assisted living kind of just integrated in our community with their activities and their exercise classes and all of the programs that we offer. So there's not, sometimes I've been in communities where a building is unlicensed and you go from that one to assisted living, and there can be a little bit of the, oh, she's going to the other side kind of thing. And we just don't have that. So I like that part.
That's good.
It's seamless.
It's seamless. And they're not moving again. Moving is just so stressful. Like you said, David, you've already made the decision to downsize. Then if you're in a community and you have to go again to a different building, which means a different dining room, means new friends, it's just kind of nice if it's all there to begin with.
Right. We had this conversation in November with my mom and stepdad asking about that same thing. So my mother was older. So if she dies first, does John still want to live in the cottage? He's like, oh, you betcha. I'm not moving to the apartments. He likes to be by himself. I'm not moving to the apartments, and I don't really want to go into anything further unless he needed to for health.
Right.
But I mean, again, it's those the opportunities there, but it's the important conversation to have.
It is to understand.
That was the case with my in-laws, where they worked together first, but as she rapidly deteriorated, she had to go into the memory care part, and then he was able to maintain his independence, and he could visit every day 2-3 times or whatever. So it was convenient.
That's a really good point, because we do have a lot of couples where there are a couple scenarios. One might still be living in the family home and coming to visit, or they live in 2 different levels of care. So it's nice when people can come together to us earlier in the dementia stage. So if they're seeing cognitive decline and they come and they can live together and have the one that has the impairment go to programming throughout the day, the one who doesn't can live their life and have his or her needs met that are different needs than that person with memory loss. And then when the time comes that the one with the memory loss needs a secured environment, they're right there in the same community.
Yeah.
But it's nice when they can acclimate together in the initial stages and move in, and it's just so it just really troubles any couple to have to split up.
Right.
So
Yeah, it's a whole other
think
layer of
it's
stress and adaptation.
yeah, and sadness.
Yeah.
You know, because
Yeah.
it really is a loss. You're slowly losing that person you love, and if the person with the decline, that spouse is the person in the world that's most familiar. So they're very latched on because they know them, and the rest of the world is getting a little fuzzy. So if they can come together early. That's what I love, when we can move them into an apartment together, and then maybe in 6 months he or she has to go to a secured environment,
Right.
but at least that
They're
piece of
together
it,
for that.
yeah,
For that.
exactly, yeah.
All right, so the market's a little different than it was a few months ago. So what's your advice to those folks who want to start thinking about downsizing?
Well, first of all, the market's a little bit different today than it was yesterday.
That's true.
It changes every day. It is that rapid. So first it was hot, then it was not so hot, then it was cold, then it was warm, then it was, so it's a constant state of flux. Right now, it's supply and demand. It always is. So there is not an abundance of homes on the market. So that gives you a tight market. So prices have been relatively stable. In some cases, well, I know that the San Diego Council for Agents, they are predicting more modest increase for the year is somewhere in the range of 3 to 6%, somewhere like that. Interest rates will have a lot to do with that. And, how's your crystal ball compared to mine, right? So that's a big damper on the housing marketplace. And do we have an affordability problem? We certainly do. However, I just looked in the stats yesterday, and year to date, average market time in San Diego County is 37 days. That's not too shabby. That says it's still a slight seller's market. So for people that are interested in wanting to sell or move on to the next stage of their life, now would be the time. Even right now as opposed to summertime, because again, most people think, well, it's a school situation, more homes come onto the market then, but they take longer to sell because there's competition. Right now, with the market being so, like in Encinitas, there are 40 homes on the market.
That's it?
That's it.
Wow.
That's it. So again, if I lived in Encinitas and I was in this situation about contemplating downsizing, now would be a time, because chances are I can get top dollar in a relatively short period of time to sell.
Wow, interesting.
So does that line
Is
up?
that answering your question then?
It does, but does that line up with, let's say I wanted to go to Belmont Village, is there a wait list? How long is that transition from, let's say, when I'm putting my house on the market, then actually having a
question, Carol, because
having a
you're
home?
right, that there's a misconception that one will fluidly roll right into the next, and it's not always that fluid. I always recommend that people who are going to make the move, and then deal with the house, so that you have an environment that is unchaotic, that you can come home to, and then you're going and you're doing all of the downsizing piece of it, because that is that's just so stressful. I've seen when people move in, if they're moving in the same day as their furniture and their boxes and all of that, it's a very different introduction to the community than it is if you use, for example, a downsizing company, a senior move manager, or your adult children, hopefully, would do this for you and set up your apartment, and then you come in. But waiting for the home piece of it, I think it's nice when they come and they get settled in the community and then deal with that.
I agree, and that would have my vote. But I also consider it a bit of a luxury, because sometimes
You're right.
the financials do get in the way.
Correct.
And they need the proceeds from the house
In order to.
do the move.
So, David, would you say that it's better to, because aren't there tax ramifications for a senior to sell a home over renting it with the capital gains and all of that?
Yes, well, again, capital gains is capital gains. You can't get away from that.
But if they pass away, they wouldn't be affected in the same way. If the family can hold on to the house, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I
So,
had this recently.
and they're still going to get the one-time exclusion. You know,
Correct,
I think it's raised to, don't hold me to this exactly, but I think it's like close to like $550,000
$550,000
between two spouses.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I did it, it was $250,000 each, but that was, like I said, 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so we see both where people need to sell the home because they do need that financial asset to move in, but we also see it where they think, gosh, we need to offset the rent monthly with the rent from our property, and then hold on to this asset so that we're not paying capital gains prior to mom or dad's death
Right.
on the house.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I always, in those scenarios, I keep my real estate hat on, I stay in my lane,
Yeah.
and I say, you know, I can always recommend a couple of good attorneys, CPAs, for legal advice because
Exactly.
I do stay in my lane
Yeah,
in those
I do
situations
the
because the
same thing.
laws are changing
Right.
constantly.
Right. And
right.
there's so many professionals who know exactly how to handle that. Yeah.
And that's one of the things I'm thankful for. In my years of practice, I've been able to surround myself with a team. So I'm not working in isolation. I can always pick up the phone and get the
happen as
consultation
well.
and
Right.
set up those connections for the client.
That's great. I love that. To have those resources really helps because when they feel like there's something they don't know, the anxiety against it's a spin out. They don't want to make the change
Correct.
because there's no direction to go in.
And that can be
Right, too
from
many
having an
unknowns.
electrician or a handyman all the way, you know, to top-notch legal advice or wealth management advice.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right, because it can be really daunting to get your house ready to sell, I imagine.
Oh my gosh.
Because you're dealing with the realtor who wants it staged and you're dealing with your kids who don't want your stuff.
Right.
Right? So you got, that's a
That's
lot
why you
of
have a
stress right there.
garage.
It's so true. Or a home that they have had for 40 or 50 years and it needs some lipstick
Yeah.
in order to put it on the market.
Now, that's where I come in because all of a sudden, I am supposed to be the magician. I'm supposed to get that home sold for $2 million because their neighbors sold for $2 million. That was just upgraded, 90%. And theirs hasn't been touched for, like you said, the 10, 20, 30 years.
Right.
And that's another conversation, but it is a process.
I don't envy you on that one.
I enjoy the challenge. What can I tell you?
Yeah, absolutely. It is fun helping seniors. It's really fun when they
Yes.
because they're so vulnerable and you want to be able to steer them in the
And
right
some of the
direction.
nice letters I've gotten at the end of the process, it makes it worthwhile. And, all of a sudden, it didn't sell in 2 weeks, but it sold in a month. And I went from bad guy to good guy again.
Zero to hero,
So,
David.
yes.
There you go.
So, but, that's the bottom line, right? I'm hiring you to sell my house. I want it sold.
No, I get it.
From your experience since you downsized, is there anything you missed from having that larger home?
Just one thing. I had a beautiful koi pond, and I don't have that now, and I do miss that. We had it. It was, 15 feet by 6 feet across. But I've had a recent conversation with my wife, and we've figured out a way to maybe put it in my new place. It'll be an indoor koi pond, in a kind of a arboretum type style, and I've got the design all done. I just need to
That's
sell
what
it.
she's telling you. You're really going to get a fish bowl.
A
With
fish
little
tank,
goldfish in
yes.
there.
No, I just need to sell a few houses. That's all. No,
And there's Lake San Marcos. I might have fish
but
in there.
no, it's a lifestyle change.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
You're so right because I did it recently too, 5 years ago, going from a 5-bedroom family home to a condo, and I don't miss a thing. I recently thought, well, it would be nice to. I used to entertain a lot, and then I was really happy not entertaining because it's nice just to be entertained.
Right.
But like for Super Bowl or something, this place isn't going to fit more than 10 people comfortably. But I think it's so nice to be able to, I think you said, close the door, lock it, and you're gone. You don't have to think about a thing.
Right.
You know, there's no yard to worry about. There's no real overhead to consider in that process. So when your kids are grown, and I don't have grandkids yet, but I'm really hoping it's coming soon, that you can just bop around and go see the people who are near and dear to you because they're now rooted. Now they're placing their roots, and it's more difficult for them to leave once they have kids.
It's a less selfish approach, I imagine.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
And all those are key points. I've experienced all of that, so I have to agree.
Yeah.
Internally, I felt lighter, so there was no real headache. So mentally, I walked straighter around the place. And like you said, just that inner freedom, if you will. Not that I'm traveling the world or taking cruises every other week, but I could.
And I could find everything in a small space. I couldn't find stuff in my big house because it could have been 3,300 square feet or something. Where'd I put that? I don't know. Now I know exactly where everything is.
So I assume that's a common theme for your new residents,
It
sort of that
is.
adjustment that there are some pros, but more pros than cons, I imagine.
There are more pros, and I will tell you, I think the number one thing is at the beginning of this, we said the one reason might be a fall, that people move to senior living. Well, mobility issues continue to become a challenge as you age, and if your space is smaller, it's less to navigate, and it's actually an advantage. So if they have less space to navigate and more things to hold on to, it's just, and of course the bathrooms that are all equipped with the pull bars, the pull down shower benches, emergency lights and pull cords and things like that. It's just a safer place to be.
Oh yeah, I hurt my back about a month ago, and I have a one level with one step, and I couldn't even manage that. So I imagine, keeping all that in mind, that you really need to have those securities in place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's nice. We have there's no steps for anybody to have to worry about anymore, which is great. And then for those that need extra support, there's always caregiving staff there. So if somebody's coming out of the hospital, hopefully they're going to rehab a broken hip or whatever it is, but they need a little extra support in the meantime. They have a walker, they have a wheelchair, they're going to have a caregiver there to make sure that they can get from point A to point B. And that's the other thing that I think I love is that our community is big. So they're getting more exercise just getting to the dining room than they were at home. So they're increasing their stamina and their mobility will improve between that and our exercise classes every morning that they really like going to because it's kind of social.
And the mental stimulation, having the conversations,
Yeah. And then there's a lot of on-site services in senior living. At Belmont Village, we have physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, those disciplines that are available for people who need them with a doctor's order. And then just mobile podiatry and doctors. There's a lot that they don't have to worry about.
And you have some of the finest chefs on staff too, because I've
certainly
been to some of your events.
Yes, I
the
do.
food there is incredible.
It's really good, and it's important that it's good. I don't know if you guys have kids. I remember when my kids were in 6th grade science camp, and it didn't matter how fun that camp was. If the food was bad,
It was a bad camp.
it was bad camp.
It was a bad camp.
Just a bad
Came
camp.
home and ate for a week.
Totally.
Yeah.
But if the food was good, it was a whole different thing. It's the same in senior living. You have to have good food. It's the most social component of the community is the dining room. Because you might not care about jewelry class, and I might not care about the men's club or a TED Talk or whatever's going on, but everybody's got to eat.
Right, everyone has to
So
eat,
it's the most social. It's got to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're paying for it, so it should be.
Right. All right, anything else that you want to touch on today?
One of the reasons we're here, we're having a Senior Expo
We
coming
are
up,
having
right?
a Senior Expo. I was going to get that.
Oh, you were?
I was going to
Okay.
get to that.
Okay.
The Encinitas Chamber of Commerce, as you guys know, is having a Senior Expo Embracing Retirement, February 25th from 9 to 1 at the Encinitas Community and Senior Center. Both David and Therese will be there exhibiting with more than 40 other exhibitors. It's a free event open to the public, and we'd love to have you join us.
And bring their questions.
And bring their questions.
I'm more excited about it this time as I get closer to retirement. I'm all about I can't wait to make my rounds in there.
I'm so thrilled that you guys joined us today. Thank you so much for your insight, your expertise. I really appreciate it.
It was
Thanks
nice.
for thinking of us,
Learned a lot
Carol.
here. Yeah, thank
Very
you.
appreciative.
Thanks. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to our sponsor, Max Lux. Join us again for the next episode of Encinitas Chamber Chat Live. For more information on the Chamber and its activities, please visit encinidaschamber.com.